you have some quail that are losing feathers and you're wondering what exactly is causing that, what should you do about it? Well, that's what I'm going to talk about in today's video and get it all cleared up for you. Hey guys, welcome back to another Slightly Rednecked video. Again, my name is Chris. If you're not familiar with this channel, I help you to produce your own meat, eggs, and vegetables from your backyard, your balcony, your deck, your garage, or heck, even a spare room in your house if that's the way you want to do it. In today's video, we're going to discuss why your quail are losing feathers. There's several different reasons for that, and exactly what you should do about it. So let me start off by showing you a couple of examples of some quail with some feathers lost and some different ways that it happens. So let me grab a hold of it. Here we go. Okay, so the first thing, let me close this up so I don't lose one. The first thing is this bird right here, and hopefully you can see on the back of her head, she's missing all these feathers right here. Now this is a telltale sign of breeding activity. When the males breed the females, they tend to grab them by the back of the head, the feathers on the back of their head, and they pull on them. So if they're getting overbred, if you've got too many males or something like that in there, this can become a real issue where all your females are losing their feathers on the back of their head. Sometimes you just get males that are just a little bit over aggressive with their breeding, and that can cause that as well. As far as what to do about it, really nothing. It's not a major concern. It doesn't really affect the quail in any way. It's nothing you really need to be too terribly worried about. And in some ways, it's actually an easy way to sex your quail out, because you can easily pick out which ones are the females and which ones are the males. The males are the ones with all the feathers on the back of their head, and the females are the ones with missing feathers on the back of their head. So in these silver quail where you can't just feather sex them, that's actually a pretty good indicator, and it makes it a little bit easier. Okay, there are some other situations where birds will lose feathers. Let me see if I can find one here. Easy, easy, easy. Where'd you go? Where'd you go? All right, here is another bird that's missing some feathers, and you can see missing feathers all down its back right there. This is different than breeding activity. This is not the feathers on the back of the head that are missing. This is feathers on the back, and these go all the way down. He's got some missing right here, and it looks a little bit bloody right there. So what you may initially think is this is due to aggression and that your birds are pulling all the feathers out. And although they may be doing some of that, you may notice right here, you see these little pin feathers kind of growing back in. I don't know if you can see those on camera or not, but there's just some little bitty feathers starting to come back in. This is more really something that's in line with molting behavior with the birds. They tend to molt every great once in a while. It tends to be right when the seasons change, and we're just going into winter right now, so this is common, something common you're going to see in your birds around this time of year, especially when they hit about 6 months old. That seems to be a time when they like to molt and lose all their feathers. Let me put him back and I'll discuss that a little bit more. Okay, so again, the molting behavior is pretty common whenever you get change of seasons, when the birds get about 6 months old, and what they do is they just kind of start to lose their feathers. They're going to look pretty scraggly. He's kind of grown some of his back in already, but generally what you're going to see is a bird that's just, especially down their back, sometimes on their chest, they're going to have all these feathers missing. And at first you might think, well, hey, that's aggressive. You know, the other birds are picking on it, they're pulling all the feathers out of it. But generally you can tell, because you'll have multiple birds at the same time that kind of go through that molt. They tend to do that together. You'll usually find feathers laying around the cage or on the ground underneath the cage, and you can't see it right now, but I've got lots of feathers on the ground around the cage. And again, it's very, very common. It's just naturally what the birds do. You will sometimes see where they look a little bit bloody, a little bit not, and you can see on that bird there, wasn't a lot of blood, just little bits, little drops where it looked like maybe they'd been picked on just a little bit. That's pretty common too, but that's not what's causing the feather loss. That's just a reaction to the feather loss. The other birds see that bare skin, and they tend to want to kind of peck at it a little bit. What you will generally notice is those birds that are molting will kind of stay in the corners, stay away from the other birds a little bit until they grow their feathers back in. It's going to take them a couple of weeks, probably 2 weeks, something like that, to grow them back in. There's really nothing special that you need to do. If you're feeding a high protein feed, then that's really all that they need. If you're not feeding a high protein feed, I would encourage you to switch to a high protein feed, or at least add that to their feed during that molting time, because they need that extra protein to regrow those feathers. Now that can affect your egg laying a little bit. During molt, they tend to not lay eggs, or not lay nearly as many eggs. And you may end up with some eggs with like no shells on them, and some of those kinds of little bitty tiny eggs, some of those kinds of things during that period. It's nothing to worry about. It's going to resolve itself as it goes. But again, adding a little bit of high protein feed, like 30% or something over about 27, 28% protein, somewhere right around in there, is going to help them to recover from that molt a little bit quicker. Nothing really to worry about from that standpoint. Now, let's talk about a few situations where you see aggression, and that's the cause of feather loss. And I do have a bird or two in here that is recovering from some aggression. Let me see if I can find one. All right, this bird has had some aggression. You can see probably, hopefully you can see that his eye is pretty beat up, looks pretty bad right now. It's actually swollen shut. You can't even see the eye. That is a clear sign of aggression. The other bird's attacking this bird, or one bird probably in particular attacking this bird. The other side is just fine. He can see out of that just fine. So let me get him back in there. We'll talk about what to do with that. Okay, let's start off by talking about what causes that. That's typically what you're going to see whenever it comes to males fighting with each other. If you've got too many males in your cage, they do start to pick on the other bird and go after their eyes. If you've introduced new birds to your flock, so if he was new and the rest of them were all existing birds, all used to each other, you're going to see that kind of behavior a lot of the time. They'll go after the eyes and peck at the eyes. Sometimes they'll peck at the head, so you'll get the forehead feathers that are missing right there, and just their head all beat up around their eyes, around their face. Not the back of their head like you see with the females during breeding, but it'll be pretty obvious around the face, around the head. That's typically where aggressive birds will get with each other. And so if you've got a bunch of feathers missing around the head, the eyes, that kind of thing, that is aggression that's usually causing that. Now, a lot of the times it's caused, again, like I said, over too many roosters. They're picking on each other to try to kind of establish dominance. It could be a lot. Most of the time what I see is it's the hens that are actually, you've got an aggressive hen that is just picking on the other birds in the cage and singles one out for whatever reason and picks on that bird. So the best way to deal with that is if you can find which bird is the aggressive bird, then you can remove that bird from the flock and you can deal with, you can get rid of that aggression problem altogether. What I don't suggest doing is actually removing the bird that's been picked on and putting him in his own separate cage until he heals up. I know that's the natural and that's what everybody thinks is the kind of the kind thing to do, but I really don't think that's a good idea. And the biggest reason why is if I put him in his cage by himself until he heals up, a couple of weeks, maybe 3 weeks till he heals up, and his eye's probably going to be fine. I've had a bird lose an eye before, but generally they heal up just fine, no problems whatsoever. But the problem is once he heals back up and I put him back in there, then he's a new bird to that flock, and the aggression and the fighting starts all over again, and you never get over it. Generally what I find is when a bird gets to that point where he's been picked on, he's been beat up a little bit, then, and especially when you get that eye swollen shut, that kind of a thing happens, generally they just kind of, they get over it. He's going to heal up just fine, and you're not going to have any more problems with aggression. I do find that my standard birds, my standard jumbo pharaohs, those the standard browns that you see everywhere, those tend to be less aggressive. And when you get into the whites, and these are Schofield silvers, when you get into like the Texas A&M, the whites, the Schofield silvers, those kinds of things, they tend to have a little bit more problems with aggression. But again, it's usually they work this out. Very seldom, if ever, do I have a bird that actually gets killed by the other birds. It doesn't happen very often at all. One other thing that can cause those problems, though, is if you let your birds run out of food. So if you're not giving them enough feed to last them 24 hours till you feed them again, there should always be a little bit of food left in the tray whenever you bring them more food. If they run out, then they will turn to cannibalism and they will start attacking each other, or they'll pick out one bird and they'll attack that one bird. So those are several reasons that could be causing some of those issues there. So I know I was a little bit all over the place in this video, but hopefully it cleared a few things up for you guys. Let me know in the comments below, have you had a different experience with your birds? Have you seen aggression from different reasons? Have you seen feather loss for different reasons? And is there anything that you do to help your birds recover from that? Thank you guys so much for watching this video. And as always, God bless.